Hi guys, just after the first of the year, so I thought it'd be a good time to do a shop tour. Some of you might be getting tired of watching me drive around yammering in the desert. This is my personal JK. It's an 09 Rubicon, and this JK is probably the most advanced swap we've done to date, even though it was the second swap that we did. And the reason is we've upgraded it with some new prototype electronics, and we're going to talk about that here in the near future. This is Chris. This Jeep is waiting for an LT4. This is typical of a lot of our customers. You can see that they have a compressor. This vehicle does have lights and cameras and stuff all over it, so when you do a swap, you want to clean everything up while the body's off. This is an old build for a customer in Germany, and he only drives it once or twice a year. He's coming back out, so we're getting it fired back up, and it's a 6-liter iron engine, and it's pretty much bulletproof. So all we got to do is make sure the battery's charged and fired up. This is an LT4. I think we've seen this one before. Got a new heavy-duty Atlas 2 in it, 8L90. It's going to be a really nice build. We've got the new style Dynatrack 60 and 80. These are the wide track, 72 inches I think. Full metal cloak suspension. We're waiting for a harness. GM has been on back order on harnesses because of the strike, but stuff's finally starting to come in. You will notice that we are running our easy mounts, which I'm going to show you here in a minute. This is an old build that we did for a guy in Utah, and he ended up putting a supercharger on it, I guess. This is an LS, and blew a power steering line while he's driving it around down here, so we're going to put a power steering hose on it for him. But that always is an option for you to put a supercharger, a cam, or whatever in your LS, and this guy went to a blower on his LS, so he's probably putting out 550, maybe, yeah, about 550 horsepower in this one, I'm going to say. Here's an LT1 that we got yesterday, and Chris and Dan are dropping the body, and you'll see how simple this is. There was no fabrication, there's no cutting the frame mounts off, there's no modifying the cross member. You'll notice that there's large slots front to rear and side to side, gives you a lot of flexibility. You'll notice that shifter plate has both transmission and transfer case cable mounts, and they're all adjustable too. These are a lot of guys ask me, what do I run on my LT1? These are GM headers. They're like a tri-wide. I think they work excellent. So unless you're going to go to a long tube header, don't waste your money. You do want to protect those hydraulic motor mounts from heat, so make sure you run shields. So these guys are dropping the body now. This is all factory GM accessory drive, and you can even see we're running the factory GM air compressor. We do manufacture this block. So guys, how is it to install one of these engines? Hard, easy, medium? How would you describe it?
Super easy. I'd say it's very easy. Yeah.
Compared to the old days where we're cutting these mounts off. And speaking of that, this vehicle was waiting for an intake manifold for quite a while, and this did have the engine mounts cut off back in the day, so we had to put some of our old fashioned Weldon mounts on, which work great, but they're just a lot of work. There's nothing wrong with these old Weldon mounts. Now you will notice we are running the new easy upper mounts so that we can use the new can. Now that is a full-size hydraulic can out of a Cadillac SUV, so it rides good and it's strong. I've seen guys tear them up doing some extreme stuff off-road, but they are captured, so you just got to replace it, and they don't cost very much. So this is the intake manifold for that Jeep. As you know, we're running an L86, and we're going to go to an LT1 intake. So here's our top Corvette trim cover. This is an insulation pad. Now the LTs do run direct injection, so they do have some mechanical noise, plus the compression ratio, and having the CVT means that you can build up a lot of cylinder pressure, and you want to silence these as much as you can, unless you like that sound. But you definitely notice that these LTs put out somewhat of a diesel sound. We are running the truck throttle body on this. You see it bolted right on. This is our purge valve. Now you will notice that there's no fuel injectors in this intake like the old LS's, and the reason is because it's direct injected. So we have a high pressure rail with the injectors in it. If you look at this LT1 here, you really can't see injectors. You can see the coils and everything else. But if we step over here and look at this L86, that rail is the injectors, the high pressure injectors. This pump back here is your high pressure pump, and then obviously we got a low pressure pump in the back. So when you change the intake out on this, it's literally just the intake. You don't have to worry about fuel or none of that. Over here we have another LT1 build. We're waiting for an LT1. We are putting full metal cloak suspension in this one, as you can see. I like metal cloak suspension. They're not the only good suspension system out there, obviously. This joint here, this Duraflex joint, rotates in the housing. It's like a little ball of rubber that, when it gets to the extremes of travel, rotates in the housing, and it's captured so that you can get a lot of flex without tearing that rubber joint. Having rubber on both ends means that you get self-centering arms that won't clank, and you get a better ride, because when you hit a tar strip, you're not getting that jolt. So we're going to full metal cloak suspension on this build. You'll notice that the frame remains entirely unmodified. Now the reason the guys have this axle disconnected and the brakes off is because we're going to a Dana 60 and a Dana 80 in the rear. Those have been ordered and we should have them soon. This is our fuel tank shield we've talked about a couple of times, and if you're running a V8 or a V6, it doesn't really matter, and you full skid it, what you're going to end up doing is capturing a lot of heat and then melting the front part of this tank. As you can see, this tank is made out of plastic. Now this is a 4-door, so you see it says long wheelbase. The 2 doors are right up against the cross member, and you don't have room to run the exhaust, so you have to run it in front of the cross member, and it does stay a little bit further away from the tank. But the bottom line is, if you have a skid plate holding that heat in, you're still going to damage that tank in extreme conditions, so be careful with that. You notice that there's no modifications to anything on this frame, not the cross member, not the engine mount area. It's a pretty clean setup. Guys, we got a lot of engines. As you can see, we were whittling them down, but if you're interested in an engine, just let us know. Here's an LT1 that we got in last week. I think you guys saw when it came in, and it's already on the road, just waiting for me to test drive. We do make our own custom valance that this one's going to get. They're out getting powder coated. This has got a short, straight intake tube that stays down and compact. We're running the K&N oiled filter. Let me say something about that. If you guys are going to go out and run Johnson Valley, or I just had a customer go to oh, I can't remember where, but he went to an area where there was silt. I'm not talking sand, we're talking silt, powder, and that's never a good thing for an engine. So run a sock and clean your filter. I've had guys run these things for days at a time out of Johnson Valley, and then call me and say, hey, my engine's running doggy, and I say, well, look at your filter, and the filter's plugged solid. So change that sock out regularly, clean the filter regularly. This Jeep does, as you can see, have a lot of extra stuff on it. You see cables back there for amplifiers, and we've got a winch, and good job sinking this winch. Rock slide bumper, I like that. I'm not a big fan of these grills. These grills with the screen mesh tend to create a high pressure air bubble out in front, because there's just not a lot of area for the air to go in compared to the stock grill, which is just a large opening. So we're going to test this out with this LT1, and we're running an engine oil cooler over here. Now this one, having these steps, was a little challenging, but you can see the cooler right there. This is just a small one, but it's really all this engine needs. A lot of these engines don't even run oil coolers. He is running a cold air hood, and while these cold air hoods let hot air out, they can also let water in, so be careful which one you run. Hoods are really a matter of preference. There's a few of them out there that will reduce heat, but there's a lot of them out there that won't. They just look good. Let's take a look at what we got out here. This is an LT4. I think some of you guys saw the video, and it's just awesome. This is really an awesome Jeep, and the LT4 8-speed is an awesome combination. Probably the most powerful Jeep we've built and I've driven, yet still one of the most docile. I can't say enough good things about this LT4. Out here we got a couple of L83s. This is a L83 that you guys saw in a video recently, and it's running great, but we had some problems with the suspension. As you can see, Well, the front axle tube was bent. The front and rear track bars were shot. The rear end was shot. We had the rear axle on the bump stops because it's just so heavy back here. We've got not only gas and big spare tire, but we've got refrigerators and all sorts of steel stuff in here. Not really sure what all that stuff is, but it's heavy. So really a lot of the time on this build was not on the build, it was getting the suspension in order, as we talked about many times before. Let's fire this thing up. This is an L83 over here too. It's an excellent engine. The L83, and by the way guys, you'll notice that our intakes now come with this MoTech part number. That's important if you're going for an executive order. Now this guy's not, so we don't have our EO sticker on it. But if you're going for an executive order, you got to make sure that you have the stickers with our part number on it. So this L83 is going to haul this heavy two-door with no problem. I have a lot of confidence in the torque of the L83. So we're going to be doing a test drive on this one. We just did a test drive on that one. We might do a test drive on this one. This one. Oh, okay, we're probably going to be doing a test drive on this one today. This is a 6.2 liter L94, and this Jeep is going to California. And there's a lot of life left in the LS. You know, if you look around, almost everything here is an LT, but this guy went with an L94 because that's what our executive order is going to be geared around. And it's still a great motor. It's just over 400 horsepower, running a 6-speed transmission. A lot of guys say, hey, can I run the 8-speed transmission with the LS? And as far as I know, you can't. There's guys working on it, trying to get an 8L90 behind a Gen 4 engine, but I don't know if they have. Now you can see that the grill opening on a stock Jeep is open. There's no screen mesh. The size of these grill inserts has not been reduced. This is how it should be, and this is going to allow airflow in. And you notice that these little side rubber flappers, they help direct that air into the radiator. Now what we got here is an AC condenser, a tranny cooler, and then the radiators behind it. So this is our transmission cooler, and this is a Pentastar transmission cooler, and it's a good cooler. The cooler that's in the bottom of the AC condenser is junk. That might be our LT4 and our LT1, I'm hoping. So if you got a Pentastar tranny cooler, by all means run it. The radiator is a 52 millimeter dual header that we are manufacturing, and you can tell it's the dual header because it has the outlet on the driver's side. Now this is running our condenser, which means we eliminated the transmission cooler on the bottom, because really that transmission cooler is just behind the bumper, and the only thing getting airflow through it is the fan, and that doesn't pull that much air through it. So this big Pentastar cooler works great. If you need to go further than this, get our rail cooler. If you want to go further than that, get our engine oil cooler. And by offboarding all this stuff, we're not putting the heat into the radiator, because right now we're putting in transmission heat, air conditioning, condenser heat, and that's being transferred into the radiator, which the fan has to then try to pull out from a low pressure zone into a high pressure zone. So it's difficult in a heavy Jeep. So what we found is that off-board transmission cooler can drop tranny temps 30 to 40 degrees, and the engine oil cooler can drop temps 30 to 40 degrees. And when you add it all together, that means there's less heat going into this radiator. So this is Gary, our shop manager, at his desk, and he's making some needs lists up for builds and for shop supplies, because every build is different. As you can see here, this is for Moby. This is for Moby, and we're converting it from an L86 to an LT1, so he's making up a needs list. And then a lot of customers, like this guy here, he's getting Dana 80s and 60, he's getting metal cloak suspension, and you got to keep all this stuff straight. So we keep multiple lists for not only the needs that we need for it, but other customer concerns. This Jeep over here has got damage in the fiberglass top, he wants us to repair it, and all this stuff can add up, and we got to make sure we keep it straight, and that's the job of this guy here. So we're going to be coming back with a lot of test drives, mostly LTs. We do have a couple of LSs. This one here, this orange one's going to be another LT1. So stay tuned. I'm going to be coming out with some new products that we're going to be supporting, some really cool electronics, some cooling products, and others. This Jeep was just torn down, and I think you can see there's a lot of wires here. We don't like to see that. We're going to have to clean all that up. This Jeep is getting a LT1. You can see we got the dual batteries here, which the LT1 is fine with. We got a lot of room here for an air intake. I don't remember if this Jeep had a supercharger. No, I don't think it did. But this Jeep is going to get an LT1. Now this is a later model Jeep. You can tell by the firewall. You can see how large that is, and that does lend itself well for the LTs because it gives you more room. I don't like tranny cooler brackets like this because they just block airflow. All that dead space is just blocking airflow. So try to avoid that if you can. A lot of guys are running these LED lights and they work great. I agree that the JK doesn't have very good lighting from the factory. However, make sure it's done clean. The little inverters or whatever you're running, make sure they're wired in right, because we don't want to have a mess at the battery that needs to be cleaned up later. Now this one wasn't done too bad. I mean, there's a lot of wiring here just because there's a lot of wiring here. Sometimes we see there's not a lot of wiring, but it's been done really bad and that has to get redone. So stay tuned and we'll be back with 2 or 3 more test drives here shortly.